Hey guys, this is Dave with Gazaudio, and I have another pretty exciting release. Well, at least for me, because unlike many of the other recent releases, the Muse Hifi M5 Ultra really does bring something new and quite unique, in my opinion, to the table, especially for this $300 price point. So as usual, we will go over the specifications and design, and then we'll get into the sound. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. So I have already done a full unboxing on my audio and reviews channel, so if you are interested in checking that out, I'll make sure and leave a link in the description. So as I had mentioned in the intro, the M5 Ultra is priced at $299, and as you can see, it is quite a bit larger than your typical dongle, and my guess is that's because there's quite a bit packed into this, well, not so little device. And we'll go ahead and go over the outside first. On the top, we have some branding, and they've also personalized this for me, which is really quite cool. So thank you, Muse Hifi, for that. That is a really nice touch. Then on the right side, we have a power button, some volume buttons, and then a mode button. Then right below that on the bottom, we've got two buttons that basically let you select your options once you've selected your mode. And then on the other side, we have some really cool decorative venting, and then the vacuum tubes are kind of glowing through the venting. It definitely gives it a very unique and even a little bit of a nostalgic aesthetic. And then on the front is a very simple but functional display. Below that is a window that allows you to see some of the internal components. And then finally on the bottom are the inputs and outputs. We've got two Type-C inputs. One is a dedicated charging input and the other is a dedicated data input. And then there is a 4.4 balanced output and a single-ended 3.5 output as well. Now this also does feature Bluetooth. I don't know which Bluetooth version it is, but I do know it incorporates one of Qualcomm's newer Bluetooth chips, the QCC5125. And I also know it does decode most of your more common Bluetooth codecs, and it can also decode the higher bitrate Bluetooth codecs as well, like LDAC and aptX Adaptive HD. And I did test those and everything did seem to work fine. However, I did notice that I had to stay relatively close to the M5 Ultra, because if I were to stray maybe a little too far away, I would start to lose the connection. But as long as I was within, I think maybe around 15 to 20 feet, I was fine. But that is something you just might want to bear in mind if you are going to be using the Bluetooth connection from longer distances. Otherwise, you should be fine. Now, as far as power output, I searched high and low, and for the life of me, I could not find any data on the power output. But of course, we will discuss drivability in the sound segment of the review. However, I can tell you, it does offer 3 gain levels, low, medium, and high. Now, when you move into the internals, this is where things start to get really interesting, because again, what makes this device unique is that, as far as I know, it's the only device of its kind within this price range to incorporate vacuum tube amplification, but also the first of its kind to merge vacuum tubes with Bluetooth functionality. Because from what I understand, typically those don't mix very well because of interference, I guess, that can occur between the vacuum tubes and the Bluetooth signal. But somehow they figured out how to handle that. And I don't know how, but they did it. And I think that's pretty impressive. Now, what's cool about these particular vacuum tubes is that this uses the JAN 6418 vacuum tubes, which were apparently originally produced, I believe, in 1974, and they were designed for the US military. And based on what I've read about them, they had to meet military specs. So there is a little bit of an interesting history here. And even more interesting is that apparently Muse Hifi worked very closely with ESS to develop a custom version of the 9038 Q2M DAC chip, and they refer to this marriage of technologies as the 6418 high-res architecture. The M5 Ultra also has a built-in 3000 milliamp battery that should provide about 10 hours of playback time. Now, as far as the build and design, it is a little simple, but the structure feels very robust and it definitely has some weight to it. I also like the window on the front, but without a doubt, my favorite part of the design is this decorative venting here on the side. And just being able to see that nice warm glow when the tube mode is enabled. It just looks really, really unique. And again, it gives it a little bit of a nostalgic aesthetic that I absolutely love. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the sound. So as usual, I did test the M5 Ultra with a lot of different IEMs and headphones, ranging from budget stuff all the way up to some of my higher end sets. And then I also compared it with not only my other dongles around this price point, like the Hifi FC6 and the M15i, but also with some of my higher priced stuff as well, like the Ibasso DC Elite. And then just for good measure, because this is priced a little bit higher, I also compared it with some of my other DAPs and desktop devices within this price range as well. So we'll go ahead and talk about headphone pairings and drivability first. And as I had previously stated, I don't know what the power output of the M5 Ultra is, but there were several observations that I made while cycling through the different sets. The first observation being that with some of my planar sets like the LCD3 and Aria Stealth, I did have to push the volume up to about 80 to 85% in order to achieve good listening levels. And that was the same with my HD 800S as well. But it seemed to drive most of my other dynamic driver sets like the Meze 109 Pros here a lot more proficiently. The second observation I made was that the M5 Ultra did produce a little more volume and perform generally better when plugged into sources with USB sorts that had greater power output like PCs and laptops. And I should clarify, that was something I only noticed with my harder to drive full-size sets, not with IEMs. It had absolutely no issues at all driving all of my IEMs regardless of the source. But with full-size sets, I did notice the M5 Ultra having a little bit of a challenge, again, driving my harder to drive sets at higher volumes when it was plugged into my phone. All that said, otherwise, the M5 Ultra was able to drive all of my other easier to drive sets like the 109 Pros, P2 Pros, and 99 Classics out of the balanced output. So it shouldn't have any issues driving most full-size sets, and it will absolutely have no issues at all with IEMs. So how does the M5 Ultra sound? Well, It obviously does depend on which mode you're in. Tube mode is going to provide a warmer, more analog style presentation, while transistor mode is going to sound a little more linear or neutral. I personally preferred tube mode because, well, that's what makes this different, right? That's kind of the feature that made me excited about this release, if I'm being completely honest. And the M5 Ultra absolutely delivered pretty much everything I was hoping to get and more. And what's really cool is that you can actually switch back and forth between vacuum tube mode and transistor mode in real time while you're listening to music. So it makes it a lot easier to compare the different presentations. And there is a difference, and just to break down the presentation of each mode a little more, starting with tube mode, its presentation is going to tilt a little more warm. So its general presentation is going to be more natural sounding and a little smoother in the upper mids and treble, with the focus being more on the lower half of its tuning or in the lower mids and bass. And what that does is it gives vocals and instruments a little more weight, heft, and richness to their presentation that is not as noticeable or apparent in transistor mode. But at the same time, for this having that warm tubey sound, I also feel like I'm getting way more than enough detail in the upper mids and treble. And again, while I would say its overall presentation delivers a generally smoother sound, notes still seemed to resolve adequately, and there is, again, more than enough treble detail and micro nuances to keep me from feeling that sense that things are missing. So the M5 Ultra is definitely delivering all of those satisfying, warm, tubey, very natural attributes that I would hope to get in tube mode. But beyond that, it also delivers a very nice open sound, not only in terms of soundstage width, but in terms of its forward depth as well. Now, switching over to transistor mode, the sound presentation does become more linear, more transparent, and less colored. That being said, it does not strike me as being overly clinical or sterile sounding. It still sounds natural, it still has good note weight, but the presentation seems to be closer to the more neutral sound you're likely to hear with your typical dongle. Now, another observation I made was that with my more technically capable IEMs and headphones, the M5 Ultra in transistor mode seemed to deliver better technical performance. So a little more detail, the imaging and instrument focus was a little better, and it also had slightly better layering, which is what I would have expected. But what's nice is, while retaining lots of good treble detail and resolvability, I never noticed the treble becoming overly sharpened or harsh sounding in transistor mode. It still kept the treble presentation not necessarily smooth, but smooth enough to keep its composure and maintain a generally controlled treble presentation. And I haven't really talked about bass much, but its bass presentation was also great. It was also controlled, definitely more neutral sounding in its presentation, but not thin sounding at all. Now, as far as its Bluetooth sound, you guys know me, typically I don't use Bluetooth. I'm more of a wired guy, but I know that was something Muse Hifi worked very hard to incorporate with this device. So I at least felt it only right to test it. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever enjoyed Bluetooth as much as I have with the M5 Ultra, especially in the tube mode, because it delivered almost all of the tubey attributes that I was able to enjoy in wired mode. Not all of them, but almost all of them. And if I'm being honest, it was significant enough to actually kind of catch me off guard. So I have to commend Muse Hifi for their commitment to solving that interference problem, because my feeling is that there are going to be a lot of other hobbyists that, like myself, will find themselves being equally surprised, maybe even to the point of potentially using the Bluetooth feature more than they typically do. And then finally, I also tested the M5 Ultra for background noise using my 2020 Andromedas, and I was not able to pick up on any noise at all. Now, as far as comparisons, this is where things can get a little tricky because in some ways it's almost unfair to compare it with other dongles because obviously they don't have a tube mode. And for me, that feature alone makes this device a standout amongst the competition. Then when you take all of the other features into consideration, it really makes this probably one of the easiest recommendations I've ever made in a very long time. Now, I should clarify, I still love my FC6, and I still maintain that there is something almost equally satisfying and special with its R2R presentation, but I can't definitively say I prefer it over the tube presentation of the M5 Ultra. It's just different. They both appeal to me for different reasons. They're just two different amazing flavors to choose from. Now, another favorite of mine within this price range is the Q-Style M15i, and I still might have to give it the edge as far as overall performance, and it is smaller as well, but it cannot compete with the M5 Ultra in terms of versatility, and certainly not in terms of just sheer fun. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, that is the M5 Ultra's ace up its sleeve, so to speak. It's well built and designed. It has a battery. It has Bluetooth. It offers the typical transistor mode experience. It has a display, physical buttons, but most importantly is it's very fun and it has a really cool story. And when you think about the history of the JAN 6418 and its development going all the way back to 1974 and its ties to the military, and then they've also included this really cool commemorative little desktop placard with one of the JAN 6418s encased in the resin, and then they've got the story printed on the front of the placard. But the bottom line for me is that not only does the M5 Ultra deliver the most important thing, of course, which is great sound, it also delivers lots of fun and a really cool story to boot. So well done, Muse Hifi. This is something really special. So that concludes my review of the Muse Hifi M5 Ultra. If you are new to the Gazaudio channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further, you can also support us through our Patreon. I'll be sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review. Please like this video, please share this video, please comment on this video. I hope you have an awesome day.